up from the state. Then the town has 120 days to decide whether they want to vote that project up or down. Little history of where we're at. The high school was built in 1957 and the middle school was built in 1963. The buildings have served us well, but right now there's a lot of things that need to be addressed with condition and age. Our committee, the Secondary Schools Building Committee, some people have been together for 10 years, Chuck and a few others. I've been on for 5 years. And in 2006, we got together and we had architects and engineers inspect the existing buildings and review a facility and educational needs of those buildings. And here's some things that they found out. The school was originally, this is the high school, was originally designed for 560 students. The current high school enrollment is 732 students. The buildings are obviously over capacity. A good example is we have 18 modulars between the middle and high school, and each of these costs about $100,000, including site work and hookup, and have a life expectancy of about 10 years. The spaces themselves are outdated and tired. There's just some examples. The building systems are past their useful life. The HVAC, the heating system, electrical, some of the parts, to credit of Wayne Hardacker and his department in facilities and buildings and grounds, some of the pieces for a lot of the systems that we have in place are not even in fabrication. Sometimes he has to get things custom built specifically for us, and he has to have a kind of a patch system until those pieces arrive. We also have multiple code and accessibility, ADA accessibility violations exist. They also found out that our average classroom size fails to meet the state space guidelines. The minimum requirement for a classroom, for example, they have different sizes that the state has for guidelines for all different types of spaces, for a classroom, for a gym, for a media center, library, auditorium, etc. For classrooms, it's 900 square foot minimum. Our existing high school classroom, this one is showing 576 square feet. Out of the 20 high school classrooms, 19 of the 20 of the classrooms at the high school do not meet the MSBA guidelines, and they range in size from 770 square feet to 576 square feet. The building is overcrowded. The music classes are in the auditorium. The special ed classrooms meet in the home economics room. By using these specialty rooms this way, it'll be difficult for the school to meet the requirements for 21st century skills. Both the library and the gym are more than 20% smaller than MSBA guidelines. This is showing the library on the left and the middle school and how crowded everything is, and then just a typical library on the right. This is one of those spaces where we have a computer class being basically like a garage area in the high school. And on the left, we talked about the home economics room on the left that's now being used for some special ed classes. And on the right, we're showing a modern media studio. Not to say that we have to teach media, but there's some classes that the school committee would like to put into play, and we just don't have space for it. They also found out during this study that the buildings are inefficient and costly to operate and maintain. We have an old, inefficient heating system. And nowadays, there's a lot of green, sustainable design concepts that, when put in place, bring down your operation and maintenance costs. So here's a snapshot at the process. The old process, the town would go out and hire for a study and design on a project that we want, and then request to the state for reimbursement. That's been totally thrown out. There's now a brand new process that we have to go through, and it's far more complex. And it's phased out so that we can't do anything without checking off to the state. And that's so that towns don't overbuild. The good news is that North Reading has been selected out of 225 priority projects submitted by other communities to move into this next stage. The stage is called Feasibility and Schematic Design. And the purpose of this stage is to work with the MSBA to formulate a plan to upgrade our secondary school facilities in a way that is educationally sound and cost efficient. And the state will pay approximately 50% of feasibility and schematic design costs, and we'll go into that in a little bit in detail. So what's next? Well, the town needs to authorize $1 million, and approximately half of that, approximately $500,000, would be reimbursed by the MSBA to continue this next step. Now, why do we have to do this, or why is there $1 million? It's required by the state as part of their next process. You have to do this next step if you want to be in consideration for a project. And that money is used to retain both an owner's project manager and the architect and design team. And we didn't just pull out that $1 million. That's consistent with other communities and similar projects. Basically, our architect got together with the state, and together with their experience, they talk back and forth, and they come up with what that is going to cover. And as a couple examples, you can see Wilmington, Southbridge, and Sutton are 3 recent examples of similar type projects. So what does that $1 million get you? Basically, there's 2 portions of it. One portion is the owner's project manager, which again is required by the MSBA, and that's about 20% of it, $200,000 for this stage. And the owner's project manager acts as a liaison between the town, the project team, the design team, and the state. They're made up of industry professionals, typically a large construction company or people in the industry, and they also provide the clerk of the works function. So a resident doesn't have to do that. And that's required by the state. And it also provides us with an extra set of eyes on everything. The other portion, the other 80%, is for the design team, and that goes to retaining the architects, the engineers, and all their consultants along the way. This step's required by the MSBA, and it also includes a more in-depth feasibility study, and you can see all that. One of the things that pops out is preliminary costs of materials and options development. So they're going to go through and look at everything, and they're going to come back with, is it going to be a brick building? Is it going to be a wood building? These are things that the state's going to have heavy input on. The schematic design portion will provide a refinement of the preferred option. Basically, they're going to start doing design work with the state's feedback once we figure out what kind of a project it's going to be, and they're going to come back with our project. They're going to know what our project is with input from the town through the secondary schools building committee, the state, the owner's project manager, and the design team. Everybody roundtables it, and the state has heavy influence so that the buildings are not overbuilt. So here's our timeline. The town votes $1 million for the next phase, and that's at this June town meeting. And if that goes through, then we hire an owner's project manager and the design team in August. It takes them about 6 to 9 months to complete this next stage. And at that point, we'll have exactly what our project is going to be. And when the state approves that portion, and the state says, okay, go ahead, here's what your project is, we're all in agreement. If that happens in the summer of 2011, then the town has 120 days from the time the state says go. You can go ahead. We have 120 days, and at that point, we have to approve our project funding. At that point, we'll know what our project is. We'll know what the cost is going to be. We'll know what the state reimbursement rate is exactly, because we'll know what additional credits we qualify for. And if we say yes and we vote that in, then the project can be completed in the fall of 2013. And if we say no, then we go to the bottom of the list. We can basically say goodbye to 50% funding back from the state. Next slide. So why should we proceed? Well, we've got a history of educational excellence and things that we should do in this town. There's also a cost in doing nothing. Wayne Hardacker and Ed Stiles, 2 guys that know quite a bit about the schools. Ed's the director of buildings and grounds, Wayne is the director of buildings and grounds. And Ed got together, and they put together a priority 1 and 2 maintenance needs of things that have to be done. And that's a report that was submitted. We had them updated in April, on April 20th, and that was submitted to the superintendent, and that's in excess of $10 million. And these are just priority 1 and 2 items. These are not, a wish list of a grand tour of things that we'd love to have. These are just things that need to be fixed if we don't increase any of the sizes. And if we do that, the educational requirements will still not be met. The operation and maintenance costs are going to continue to increase with the cost of energy increasing. The indoor air quality concerns are still there. There's a lot of asbestos and HVAC issues in both buildings, both the middle school and the high school. And there'll still be a space deficiency. The other thing is they call it a Chapter 34 compliance. Basically, if we do any other projects to the high school, and we want to do some kind of an upgrade of whatever that is, enlarge the classrooms, whatever that may be, if we do a project that is larger than 30% of the current assessed tax value of the high school, then we have to bring the entire building up to ADA code, and that would be extremely costly. High schools don't pay taxes, so their buildings are not assessed as regularly as houses are. So if we do any kind of major project, then we'd have to bring that up to ADA code. Why else should we proceed? Well, the problems aren't going to get any better. They're going to continue to worsen. The energy costs are not going down. We've seen them go up every year. It's also a good market for new construction. An investment in education also is an investment in property values. So why else should we proceed? This is going to be a one-time deal. We have a one-time opportunity to receive state reimbursement. If we don't want to go it alone and we want the state to pay basically 50 cents on the dollar for an approved project that they approve that we're not going to overbuild, then we need to do this now. And to talk a little bit about the rate, we've got the MSBA set North Reading's base rate of reimbursement at 45.1%. And there's additional point incentives that are added depending on the project. There's different things like, for example, if you build a green school, you get a certain number of percent. If you have combined spaces between a middle and high school that are shared, for example, you would get additional percentages. So we can't give you the exact total. We'll tell you that the absolute bare minimum is 45.1%. That's a mathematical evaluation that the state put together, and they gave it to Dr. Manville, and that is our base rate. We're guessing that, or we're estimating that our rate is going to be approximately 50%. It could be 49, it could be 55. But we feel comfortable going on the direction of our architect when talking with the state on what they both think that is going to happen, that that's a pretty confident number in that 50%. So the time is now, and the students of North Reading, both for today and the students of tomorrow, are counting on your support. Thank you. Are there any questions?
I've asked this question before, and I'm reasonably sure I got the right answer, but I'm going to ask it again. If the town decides not to go forward with the project, I'm saying we put up the feasibility money, and then it goes to town meeting and an override question, it fails. It's my understanding that the state will still reimburse us for 50 or 45% of the feasibility study. Is
Basically,
that correct?
Yes, it's actually at the base rate of 45.11%. That would be, and it's the feasibility and schematic design. So we'll know if we do this next stage, it's not just a simple feasibility study, as we've done before. This is really in-depth. It's something that we have to do according to the state, and we'll define our project. Right now, we're not allowed to define what the project is. So in order to know what the project is, we have to go to this next phase.
Is the feasibility study actually capped at $1 million, or is that what you're looking for?
That will be capped at $1 million. We will negotiate, and that's where we will be at.
It's a fixed price.
Okay.
So it'll be a fixed price.
It's a fixed price. The fixed prices that come in.
It's a fixed
for
price
the
contract.
OPM will be a fixed price, and a fixed price for the architect will come in also. We did do some work already, which kind of lowers the price of the first feasibility study. We did some site work up there, a little bit of site work. So that helps us.
Sean?
How much was expended on that first feasibility study that was conducted about 5 years ago?
About $35,000, okay, for the first one. I mean, I thought you would bare bones type information on school space. It didn't really go into it deeply, but it gave us a handle on what we were lacking.
It was also under the old guidelines too. So we were running under the old guidelines doing that, and we were trying to create our own project. Now you're not allowed to do that. You have to go to this next stage, and the state's heavily involved to define the project. So that's where we go.
Hi. The $1 million, is that a number that we came up with, or is that a number that the state said that we had to put in place?
It was a combination of the state with Doran Whittier made a phone call to the state. Doran Whittier did our original feasibility study, and they've been working with us all along since the moratorium on all the work that we've done. They made a phone call to the state, and between Doran Whittier's input with the state came back with that $1 million number.
And
And we're comfortable with that comparison to other towns as far as a check. I mean, we have done our due diligence to look at that.
now, is there a possibility that whatever our costs are, let me backtrack, the state will only pay for 50